Welcome to Second Take, the show that focuses on the issues behind the news. New coal mines are urgently needed in South Africa, with current infrastructure provision in the Waterberg coalfields being urgent just to keep the lights on. Mining Weekly editor Martin Creamer tells us more. Welcome, Martin.
Thanks, Shannon.
There's been a call for South Africa's strategic infrastructure projects to be realigned to assure a lower carbon future. Is it possible for South Africa to keep the lights on and reduce carbon emissions?
No, it's not possible, and I think that it's been clearly stated now that South Africa is so dependent on coal. It's like trying to turn around a massive big ship. You're just not going to be able to do it in time. And in fact, in order to keep things going, keep the lights on and keep our current account safe because of the export of this coal, you're going to have to go along with these strategic projects which have been approved by the State President's office to make sure that you've got transport for your coal, to make sure that you can even bring coal to the power stations that remain in Mpumalanga. So the Waterberg region, as it develops, it needs to be mediated with infrastructure, water and rail, and that rail then leads to ports, etc. Because South Africa's caught with coal. It's so dependent on it. From the electricity point of view, it's beyond the 90%. And from our car point of view, a lot of us drive around in Gauteng here, maybe not at the coast, but a lot of the parts of the interior of the country on Sasol fuel. And that comes from coal, a lot of it. And also, we get chemicals, and we get diesel as well from coal. We get fuel for aircraft. South Africa really backed coal, probably more than any other country in the world. And it's just going to have to continue with it because the consequences are too great. You've got to have this electricity at this sort of price. Already people are complaining about it because they try to keep the price of electricity down for too long. And now the increases have got to be too high. And we're leaping up too high and affecting the economy badly. There are all sorts of implications of trying to, mitigate against climate change. And although the government at the same time is going along with wind power and sun power and all the rest, the cost is enormous. So they are bearing that cost, but it's going to have an impact down the line on the economy. The economy will grow less because the costs are higher.
So the only way forward then is climate adaptation, but that in itself costs money. Where will that come from? Yeah,
so they're saying adaptation at best. You're not going to get mitigation. It's just we're too deeply into this. And, what if we mitigate and then China continues to pollute? How's this going to help? The whole world will have to do it. And developed countries perhaps will have to fund developing countries because they're really the big polluters. Converting coal into transport fuels does create a lot of CO2, but that's what we also have here. We're trying to move towards gases. You can't always do that. So finance for adaptation isn't there. You can only get finance for mitigation. So again, we're between a rock and a hard place in a country that where people are still saying we haven't actually closed the electricity gap yet. There's still people who haven't got power in their homes, like 20% of the people. In Africa, it's much bigger. In developing countries, it's much bigger. So there's a complaint. Look, surely these people should get their power first, and they need to get it at a cheaper rate. The developed countries have been doing this all along. Now they're telling us we're doing the wrong thing and we've got to turn around, but at a huge cost. It's just impossible. And as things go now, the developed countries with the funding, they won't fund adaptation. If you're going to mitigate, they'll give you funds. And that means that you're mitigating against climate change by stopping the use of coal and using sun power and wind power and water power and all the rest. The cost of that is so great. Even in Germany and Japan, they're moving back to coal. They are trying to clean it up, though. And, that's one thing that there should be no excuse. They've got to go all out to be more efficient. Because, a percentage increase in efficiency is exponential when it comes to cleaning up coal and the emissions.
So that's one of the ways they could possibly look at reducing the emissions.
But that also costs money. So, wherever you go, it costs money.
Now, coal is so essential for electricity production in South Africa. What do you think the future outlook for the commodity is?
Well, look, it's like Topsy. It just keeps growing like crazy. The demand just keeps growing. I mean, it's never been like this in history. It's just a question of the world. There's such momentum. It takes such a lot of time to change. They were saying just the introduction of coal took 50 years. So now if you reverse it, it'll probably take 50 years. Oil took 30 years, and then you can't just reverse out of these things. It just takes too much time. the same time, we see the floods in the UK, we see more flooding around the world, we see problems. We're hoping Africa doesn't overheat, because, that would be a really big problem for us. We're supposed to stick within this band of not allowing the temperature to go beyond 2 degrees by 2020, but they're all saying, we're just not going to make it. And it will probably be a different, higher than 2% temperature by that stage. And so we'll have to adapt. Adapting, you wonder, what are you going to adapt to? Is it going to be more rain? Is it going to be less rain? Are you going to be short of water? If you have too much water, it's all sorts of problems that are coming up. And of course, there's still denialists down the line. But when you see what's happening in the world, people are saying to the denialists, but look at, this is discernible. We can all see there's a change in climate. They then say, well, look, didn't it happen in 1776, or that sort of thing.
Ice Age.
Yeah, Ice Age. So there is this argument, but at the same time, I think it's prudent now to try and clean up the Coal Act. And surely, scientists could come through with something beyond carbon capture and storage, which seemed very, very hard on land, and being more efficient as a coal burner, you can see does a lot of good. And that's that's the route the Germans are taking.
And regardless of whether climate change is fact or fiction, I think Beijing could benefit from any reduction in carbon emissions.
For sure. Beijing and the Chinese community have grown so fast. The industrialization is so big that they actually now have got a problem with air pollution. They're trying to reverse that. It's not easy. And of course, it might be a market for our platinum at some stage, which to try and clean the air of Beijing and Tokyo and all the rest.
Well, thank you very much, Martin.
It's a great pleasure, Shannon.
That's it for today. Join us again next week for more news analysis on South Africa's mining industry.